Fire Emblem Engage has been out for over a week or so to a colorful cast of characters, meme creation, and Twitter clips aplenty, and many hailing its return to form to pre-Three Houses levels of engaging maps, innovative gameplay, and a corny, yet earnest, classic story of heroes and dragons. With this re-emphasis on more intricate gameplay strategies, there are lots of things in the game that had I known ahead of time, or had I paid closer attention to the game's mechanics, I'd be better off. It goes without saying that this video goes over gameplay and mechanics spoilers, so heed this as a warning. But if you don't care and are looking for gameplay help, then this is the video for you. This video is meant to appeal to players of all skill levels, from those on normal and hard to even the most hardcore on their Maddening run right now. These tips range from in-battle help to Somniel optimization and pre-fight preparation, and I'm confident that no matter what stage of the game you are at, you will learn something. Here are 10 things you need to know in Fire Emblem Engage. Number 1. Maddening has fixed growth rates. Historically, Fire Emblem's most brutal difficulties have always had the added worry of making the experience dreadfully worse by the curse of bad RNG and bad levels. The Lords of Series Past didn't need to be RNG blessed, but they had to not be RNG cursed. In early maps, Lunatic Robin needed to accrue a lot of defense, Maddening Byleth had to reach a certain amount of speed to not get doubled, and Hard Mode Roy needed to survive. For better or worse, Engage's Day 1 Maddening mode simplifies these complications by providing fixed stat gains level to level for your units. Functionally, this is an interesting concept. On one hand, it's true, these units are RNG curse proof to ensure that everyone is on a level playing field. On the other, the novelty of RNG blessed units and unlikely heroes are a lot less likely to occur. But still, this is important to know. Because of the nature of level ups, you will still get really good levels and actual empty levels. But fret not. It's all part of the experience, and you will never need to restart a chapter for a better level. Number 2. Equipping bond rings for SP gain. Previous games would allow characters to learn skills in various ways, equip 5 at a time, and generally have a pretty healthy ability to access those numerous benefits. In Engage, however, beyond what various rings can give you, units can only equip 2 skills. This limitation is important to keep in mind in general, but especially when skill inheritance unlocks when units reach bond level 5 with emblems. Beyond the limit of skill slots is the hella expensive, in relation to how little early game units gain SP, cost of inheriting skills. Your first few chapters of units come in with an average of 300 SP, with some 500 point units 6 chapters in. And at least in Maddening, skill point gain is super slow, and can only be gained if units have a ring or a bracelet equipped. Getting the most cost-effective skills like Canter, Reposition, Staff Mastery, and so on as soon as possible will make your gameplay experience so much smoother. So give everyone bond rings, even if the stat boost is +1 only. For most of the game, you're never going to have enough emblem rings for all of your deployed units. In fact, you're only working with 2 emblem rings for the first 5 chapters. The bonus that Fire Emblem Heroes gives you, the rings for Alphonse, Sharena, and Anna, makes early game bond ring use even easier. And since Faye is free, it's a perk worth getting. And the skills that come with these bond rings, Spur Attack, Spur Res, and Fortify Defense, are functionally great for some in-the-moment buffs. Not to mention, the weapons they also give aren't even that bad. The process to getting the Faye bond rings is very simple. Open Faye, tap the coin icon, proceed through the menus, copy your code somewhere, open the eShop on your Switch, input the code, install the items on Engage, and open the game afterwards. Presto. They'll appear upon opening it up in your file. The reason you want to invest in these rings as early as possible is because the units you normally use anyway won't all be accruing skill points unless you put bond rings on them, and the Faye ones are pretty solid. Number 3. Bond rings and skills. Some of them can provide some pretty solid stat gains at their A and S ranks. Even more rare is the fact that 28 of the rings actually come equipped with skills your units can take advantage of. These range from movement skills like Eliwood's Drawback or Mia's Shove to healing/damage prevention like Sita's Sympathetic or Deirdre's Renewal, to the quite strong combat rings like Claude's Wind God or Olwyn's Dire Thunder. Of course, the chance to get these bond rings depends on rare rolls and needing the appropriate emblem ring to create the ring you're looking for, but those rings can be game changers, especially in the early and mid game. But in case you weren't aware, there are a few workarounds to mitigate the randomness of bond ring pulls. Firstly, the order you acquire bond rings is set to the current RNG seed of the world. If you keep resetting the game hoping to create 10 new bond rings, you will soon realize it won't work. You need to roll a new seed instead. It was recently discovered, as far as I know, by this commenter on Choops' video about bond rings, which is linked below if you want more information on them, that the position of the bond rings are directly influenced by the amount of enemies on the deployment screen of a paralog map. In my example, it takes exactly 80 pulls to acquire Dimitri S for Paraceline. I went to Erica's paralog, which has 38 total enemies on the prep screen. I exited and re-entered a second time, totaling the bond ring placement shift to 76. I then went to the ring chamber once more, created 4 individual bond rings, and voila, Dimitri's S ring. Costed only 400 bond fragments. It should also be noted that ring placements are universal throughout every emblem pool, meaning that Dimitri, 4th on the list of Byleth's pool, corresponds to Cordelia in Lucina's pool, as she is the 4th on Lucina's list. So, say I was creating bond rings and got Cordelia S, which has no skills. I could simply reset my game, recreate but on Byleth's banner instead, and I would get Dimitri S. This greatly economizes bond fragments, but it is at the expense of time spent burning RNG until you get a favorable S ring to strive for. Bear in mind, mileage will vary on bond ring pushing, as different paralogs will have different amounts of enemies. Try to do this on a densely populated map like Ike's, Lynn's, or Erica's instead of Lucina's, if you need to close the gap. Conversely, if you have Lucina's to burn, that can push 9 bond rings, which would get you closer without outright skipping the ring you want. Skirmishes do not seem to work for this either. I don't know why paralogs do this, and I don't know what else this affects, but for the context of bond rings, this is important to know. Again, credit to Choops and the commenter for this discovery. Number 4. You should promote early when possible. It is often pondered whether one should wait till level 20 to promote a unit, find a middle ground at level 15, or promote the moment one reaches level 10. But one may be surprised to hear that in Engage, you absolutely shouldn't wait too long, and in fact, seriously consider promoting at level 10. Units' growths get altered when they advance a class, which in particular is an important benefit in Maddening. Also, characters have an internal level that affects the speed of EXP growth. So if you wanted to promote at level 20 and not level 10, your promoted levels will take longer to reach because you had an extra 10 levels before them. Depending on how you are using your units, you might naturally have multiple units ready to promote by the time you get 2 Master Seals in Chapter 7's Paralog and the main mission. Soon after, 3 Master Seals will become viable for 2,500 gold per seal each chapter. Next reason to promote early, you're never going to cap out on levels, because second seals allow you to immediately side promote to a different class or reclass into the same class as before with the same stats, just returning back to level 1 instead. Now, the secret sauce to early promotion is this. Because you early promote, you can then reclass immediately into another advanced class, foregoing the need to reach level 10 in any base class first. Proficiencies are all you need for reclassing outside of the second seal itself, which can be acquired from spending bond fragments in the arena to reach a certain bond level that unlocks weapon proficiencies. In practice, you could take Anna, an axe fighter with a pitiful 35% strength growth, but a whopping 50% magic growth. If you get Anna to level 10, promote her to a level 1 Berserker, then immediately second seal her into a Sage, skipping the Mage class entirely, she is now stacking her base 50% magic growth with the Sage's 30% magic growth, combining for an 80% magic growth, which, I'm not kidding, is the highest magic stat growth in the game. And due to fixed growths on Maddening, you can literally give her 2 Spirit Dust for a permanent +4 stat in magic. And technically, you just gave her a 100% magic growth. Truly using the reclassing system to its full potential lies here. Exploring different reclassing options comes from understanding what a character's default growths are compared with their base class and building from there with second seals. Number 5. Chain attacks. Chain attacks provide guaranteed safe damage on player phase and are an absolute nightmare on harder difficulties. When Boucheron joins in Chapter 3, the service of backup units is explained. When in melee range of a target, backup units will automatically attempt a small amount of true chip damage upon each attack unleashed on the unit. This is a really reliable way of dwindling down bosses' health bars. However, the same concept can be implemented by the enemy. This becomes frightening in general, but is one of the few ways a defensive juggernaut like Louis or Jade can be slowly chipped to death. Additionally, because of their native 80% accuracy, dodge tanks are super susceptible to them as well. In other words, if you see a group of backup units, don't expect Jade or Louis to be able to tank them all and destroy them in retaliation. Before you know it, they're getting chain attacked 3 times at 80% until they fall. Conversely though, if you equip Corrin and boost a relationship with her, she will provide pair up, which you can also inherit, which completely voids chain attacks altogether, actually making dodge tanking and defense tanking very viable even against hordes of backup units. Number 6. Heavy weapons make for ideal engage attacks. Adding on to this, blades, great axes, and other smash weapons bring some unique gameplay archetypes to the game, knocking back enemies with powerful blows at the cost of speed and attacking second. Ways around that sacrifice include waiting until an enemy is broken to attack with a smash weapon, but more importantly, forging one up to powerful might levels and then using it with engage attacks guarantees a heavy hit that can't be counterattacked. It's absolutely worth throwing some gold and resources at a couple of weapons for the right moment. For example, equipping Marth onto Celine is a uniquely interesting idea, as Celine is the only Mystic unit in the game that can also wield swords. And given that the Mystic type bonus for Lodestar Rush is that it uses magic instead of strength when attacking, you can forge and engrave a steel blade for the express purpose of giving Celine a magical nuke button. Number 7. Donation Viability. The economy of Engage seems a bit unique from previous games. Bullions, the items that are made to sell for gold, are gone entirely from this game, and while the random house on main chapter maps and paralogs might give you some gold, most of your income is based on war fund drops from representatives of the various nations you travel in, which makes things a bit awkward when donations open up in the Somniel. As you enter each new country, the option to donate to them opens up with a multi-level donation system. Of course, there are rewards, so these are more investments and not just philanthropy. That being said, those later tier ranks are incredibly expensive, and even some of the early tiers aren't exactly worth it in the early game. For example, you may regret donating to Firene once you realize how beneficial it is to donate to Brodia, because Brodia gives you a Brave Sword at tier 4 and increases in iron, steel, and silver drop rates more than any other nation. It's easier to level up the nations as the game goes on, but early game-wise, donations might not be the most important thing to prioritize. Thankfully, regardless of how one feels, the fact that weapons can't break or don't need to be repaired is a godsend for the way the economy works. Number 8. Adopt 5 dogs. In the Somniel's farmhouse, you can house animals that you adopted after battles. Each type of animal gives different types of items. Dogs give materials that can be used in the blacksmith to refine your weapons, cats give you fish that can be used in cooking, chickens drop eggs, seagulls and pigeons drop nuts, so on and so on. Keep in mind that you can only have 5 animals out at once. And ideally, to maximize the benefits of your animals, it's best to have 5 dogs out at once if possible. The benefits of having dogs constantly giving you ores is that these materials are required for forging weapons. Forging a weapon to their max level or reforging a weapon into another weapon will always cost some silver. And for this reason, dogs become vital to frequently check up on. Even if you get a single silver ingot from a dog, that's still 90 iron or 9 steel if you exchange them. Number 9. Forge these weapons. Forging is extremely valuable in all Fire Emblem games, and Engage is no exception. This game has a few nuances to forging, like engraving, which adds all kinds of stats onto a weapon. Erika's engravement adds a bunch of offensive stats at the cost of lower dodge, which makes one much more likely to land a critical, but also more susceptible to critical hits from the enemy. Ike's engravement substantially increases weapon might, but also weapon weight, which is ideal for smash weapons when it comes to engage attacks, and the attack stat is the only thing that matters for those attacks, like we just mentioned earlier. But there are other really good normal weapons that can give you a ton of mileage for cheap. Hand axes and javelins are cheap 1 to 2 range weapons that are great for backups to use for chain attacks, and have no real downside for general use purposes. Boosting their might and hit is never a bad idea. Killer weapons, especially the Killing Edge, if you are committed to making Alir sword locked, is incredibly useful combined with engraves like Lynn's or Erika's for a substantial crit rate, innately reaching the 50% to 60% range. The Iron Dagger is low might, but is incredibly cheap to forge up to +4, requiring no silver ingots whatsoever. You can also engrave this with Micaiah, Lucina, or Sigurd's engravement, and stack Helpful Avoid for your coverts. The Radiant Bow is a magic bow that is shockingly high might, workable weight, and is extremely good for bypassing high defense enemies like Wyverns, Armor Knights, and Great Knights. This weapon is a godsend. Other weapons worth looking into are the Hammer, my personal favorite, the Armor Slayer, and if you can acquire it, the Thunder Tome with Olwyn's Bond Ring. With forges, all of these are handy, powerful, and accessible weapons, and not to mention, have the added benefit of naturally patching up a unit's lower than average strength growth, like Chloe for example. Do not neglect this aspect of the game, and start experimenting. But keep in mind, with engraving you can only have one engravement of each emblem, so don't go spending bond fragments and engraving all willy-nilly either. Get the skills and bond rings you want before this moment. Before I continue, I'm going to issue a spoiler warning for the early game. I won't go into any explicit character or event spoiler, but I do need to mention a chapter number and what happens in it in the most vaguest terms for this tip to make sense. If you don't want to hear it, skip to here. In chapter 11, you will be unable to use all of the emblem rings you acquired up to that point. You will slowly get them back throughout the campaign bit by bit, but you won't have all 6 of them back until you reach the late game around chapter 22. While this immediately limits you gameplay wise, it also means that you can't gain bonds in the arena with those characters, can't create bond rings, can't inherit skills, and so on. So for example, if inheriting Cantor is an important thing to you, or if you want to go for the Dire Thunder from Olwyn's Bond Ring, you should try to get that done before chapter 10. Because chapter 11 happens right after chapter 10 with no opportunity to revisit the Somniel. Furthermore, to be prepared for the loss, you should also make sure that you have a surplus of bond rings. A lucky thing that the DLC provides you is that the game clearly does not care about stealing your emblem bracelets, so you can still use them. And that will do it for today's video. This was meant to be a quick video providing vital tips that in hindsight would have been very good to know. For me, bond rings giving SP boosts is something that can easily fall through the cracks, and the Fae bonuses are something I heard about but never actually explored any further than I did because I was lazy. The thing is, I play Fae every day and I still didn't do it. Bond ring pushing is a really weird yet recently discovered exploit, but it actually works. It's just time consuming, and until you get a lot of the emblem rings at your disposal, it can be incredibly useful. I wish I paid more attention to what chain attacks are because I literally lost Jade at one point, and oh right, poison deserves an honorable mention here too. All of this true damage can really screw you up if you're not paying attention. Donations can be a money sink if you aren't careful, so I'm glad I didn't spend too much gold before realizing I didn't actually know what I was doing. The knowledge I have now of reclassing is also very neat, and it's going to be an interesting run through my second playthrough, knowing everything I know now, especially in my eventual Maddening run once I have time to sit down and stream the game again. Anyways, did you learn anything new today? How helpful were these tips, or will these tips be for you? Do you have any vital, life-saving gameplay tips you'd like to share? Let me know in the comments below. And please leave a like on this video, as liking actually does help boost this video in search ratings. Finally, please consider subscribing if you haven't yet, for immediate notifications of when a new Engage video of mine goes live. Thanks for spending your time with me. Deuces.